They came out of the sunrise, out of the endless grass of Central Asia, and they took a continent. 900 years later, their blood tells a story none of them would recognize. To understand why that is strange, you have to start with the name itself, Turk. It is one of the oldest surviving names of any people on Earth. Carved into stone monuments on the Mongolian steppe 1400 years ago, it belonged to horse lords whose empire stretched from the edge of China to the shores of the Black Sea. These were the people of the open sky, nomads, archers, herders of the vast Eurasian grassland, speakers of a language unlike anything in Europe or the Middle East. And from that world in the 11th century, a branch of them called the Oghuz turned their horses west and rode toward the setting sun. The nation we call Turkey today is named for them. Its language descends from theirs. Its founding myth is their long ride out of Asia. So every instinct says this should be a simple story. A people leaves the steppe. A people arrives in a new land. A people replaces what was there. The map changes color, the blood changes with it. That is how conquest is supposed to work. And then, in our own century, geneticists did the one thing the horsemen never could. They read the actual sequence written in the blood of the 70 million people who live in Turkey now. They were looking for the steppe. They were looking for Mongolia in the veins of Istanbul, the East Asian cheekbone, the Central Asian marker, the genetic fingerprint of the men who came out of the grass. That is what the whole story promised they would find. That is not what they found. What they found was that the overwhelming majority of a modern Turk's ancestry never came from Central Asia at all. It was already in Anatolia, the great peninsula that is the body of Turkey, thousands of years before a single Turkic horseman was born. It traced back through Byzantine Greeks and Armenians and Hittites, down and down to the very first farmers who ever planted a seed in that soil 10,000 years ago, in the age before metal, before the wheel, before any nation had a name. The steppe was there in the blood, but it was a thread, not the cloth. So here is the question that ought to unsettle you the way it unsettled the researchers who first saw it in the data. How does a people conquer a land, give it their name and their tongue, rule it for 9 centuries, and end up made in the flesh almost entirely of the people they conquered? How do you win so completely and disappear so completely at the same time? Keep that question in your mind, because everything that follows is the slow uncovering of a single secret. And the secret is not how the Turks took Anatolia. The secret is what Anatolia did to the Turks. Let us begin with the 2 stories Turks are told about who they are, because both of them are about to break. The first story is the proud one. It is the story of the steppe. For a century, modern Turkish identity has been built on the memory of those horse lords of Central Asia, the Turks who carved the name in stone, the nomads of the open grassland, the archers who could not be caught. In this telling, the Turk of today is the direct descendant of the conqueror, Central Asian in blood as well as in name, a son of Mongolia and the Altai Mountains who happens to live beside the Mediterranean. It is a story of arrival from somewhere vast and untamed, and of staying in essence a man of the steppe. The second story is the opposite, and it comes from outside. It is the lazy story the rest of the world tells that Turkey is simply part of the Middle East, one more nation in a region the maps paint a single color, interchangeable with its neighbors, just another people of that crowded ancient corner of the world. One story says the Turks are Central Asian nomads who wandered west. The other says they are indistinguishable from the Middle East around them. And when geneticists finally sequenced the population of Anatolia in detail, they discovered that both stories are wrong, and that the truth is stranger and older than either. To see why, we have to go back to a single afternoon in the year 1071 on a plain in eastern Anatolia called Manzikert, because that is the day the door opened. For 700 years, Anatolia had been the heartland of the Byzantine Empire, the surviving eastern half of Rome, Greek-speaking, Christian and old. Its cities were among the largest in the world. Its farmland fed an empire. And in the summer of 1071, its Emperor Romanos IV marched east with a great army to drive back the raiders who had begun slipping across his frontier, the Seljuk Turks, newcomers out of the Central Asian steppe. He met their sultan, Alp Arslan, near Lake Van. And in a single catastrophic afternoon, the Byzantine army was shattered and the emperor himself was taken prisoner, a humiliation Rome had not suffered in centuries. Manzikert did not just lose a battle, it broke the door off its hinges. With the imperial army in ruins, the Anatolian frontier lay open, and through it, over the following decades, poured the Turkic nomads of the Oghuz in their clans and their herds, filling the highlands of a peninsula that had been Greek and Christian for 1,000 years. They came with their language, their sky god turning slowly toward Islam, their horses and their tents. Within 2 centuries, the interior of Anatolia had a new name on it, a new faith, a new tongue. The Turks had arrived, and the story says the land became theirs. But look closely at what actually crossed that broken frontier, and the first crack appears. Because the Oghuz who rode into Anatolia were not a nation. They were bands, warrior clans and their families, herders driving flocks, an incoming stream of nomads that historians reckon in the hundreds of thousands. And the land they entered was not empty. Anatolia in the 11th century held several million people, Greek farmers and Armenian craftsmen, and the deep-rooted village populations of a peninsula that had been continuously densely inhabited since the dawn of agriculture. The newcomers were a minority from the very first day, riding into a country that already vastly outnumbered them. Hold that imbalance in your mind, because the whole mystery lives inside it. To understand who those millions were, you have to go back far past Byzantium, past Rome, past the Greeks, past even the Hittites and their bronze chariots. You have to go back to the very beginning of farming itself. Anatolia is not just an old land, it is one of the oldest inhabited farmlands on the planet. Around 10,000 years ago, on the plains of central Turkey, human beings built some of the first true villages the world had ever seen. Places like Çatalhöyük, a warren of mud brick houses packed so tightly that people walked across the rooftops and climbed down ladders into their homes. These were among the first farmers anywhere, the people who tamed wheat and cattle, who traded the endless walk of the hunter for the patient wait of the harvest. And when they multiplied and began to move, they carried farming outward in every direction west into Europe, where their DNA still forms a foundation layer beneath every European alive, and of course down through their own homeland generation after generation, without a break. That is the crucial fact. The first farmers of Anatolia never left in a mass. They stayed. Their descendants became the peoples of the Bronze Age, the subjects of the Hittites, the Greeks of the coast, the villagers of the Byzantine interior. Beneath every empire that ever ruled Anatolia, the same deep population endured, the same ancient Anatolian root, 10,000 years deep, tending the same terraces. When the Turks rode in after Manzikert, this was the sea they rode into. And here is where the genetics does something the history books alone never could. It measures the mixture. It reads a modern Turk's genome and sorts the ancestry into its sources. How much came from the old Anatolian farmers, how much from the Middle East and the Mediterranean, and how much precisely came from the Central Asian steppe with those incoming horsemen. The number for the steppe is small. In the modern Anatolian Turkish genome, the Central Asian ancestry, the true genetic signature of the conquering nomads, is a clear minority. The careful genome-wide estimates put it somewhere between roughly 1/10 and 1/5 of the whole, and one of the largest studies ever done of the Turkish population, sequencing its people in detail, settled that Central Asian contribution at under 10%. The overwhelming majority are the other 80+%. Is the indigenous ancestry of Anatolia and its Mediterranean world, the blood of the very Greeks and Armenians and Neolithic villagers who were there before the first Turkish word was ever spoken on that soil. And when researchers dated the moment that steppe layer entered the population, the estimate landed squarely in the age of the Seljuks, the 11th to 13th centuries, exactly when Manzikert opened the door. The genetics and the history point to the very same afternoon. So the proud story the story of the Central Asian nomad living by the Mediterranean breaks on its own arithmetic. The average Turk is not, in the blood, a man of the steppe with a thin Anatolian coating. He is a man of Anatolia, 10,000 years rooted, with a thin steppe coating, a gift of language, and a fraction of blood riding on top of an ancient local majority. The most Turkish thing about a Turk, genetically, is the part that was in Anatolia long before the Turks, which raises the obvious question. If the conquerors were so few and the conquered so many how did the newcomers win at all? How did a few 100,000 nomads turn a peninsula of millions of Greek-speaking Christians into a Turkish-speaking Muslim nation without replacing the people? The answer is one of the most powerful and least understood forces in all of human history. Scholars call it elite dominance, and it is the same mechanism running in reverse that we have seen on this channel before. A small ruling group does not need to outnumber a population to remake it. It needs only to sit at the top of it. The Seljuk and later the Ottoman Turks became the lords, the soldiers, the tax collectors, the sultans. Their language became the language of power, of the army, of advancement. Their faith, Islam, offered lower taxes and a place in the ruling order. And so, over generations, not by the sword in a single day, but by marriage, by conversion, by the slow arithmetic of ambition, the vast Anatolian population began to speak Turkish and pray as Muslims and call themselves Turks. They did not vanish. They converted. The village stayed exactly where it was. Only the language spoken in it and the God prayed to in it and the name written over it changed. You have watched this exact process from the other side. When we told the story of Persia, we found a land conquered again and again, by Greeks, by Arabs, by Turks, by Mongols, that kept its ancient blood while its rulers came and went. The Persians were the conquered who stayed themselves. The Turks are the mirror image, the conquerors who dissolved into the conquered. In Persia, the steppe language that became Persian rode in on a genetic minority and stayed a minority. In Anatolia, the steppe language that became Turkish did precisely the same thing. A language is light. It can cross a continent on a few thousand tongues. Blood is heavy. It stays in the ground where it grew, and there is a proof of this, hiding in plain sight, a test you can run yourself on a map. If the Turks were truly a Central Asian people, their closest genetic relatives should be the other Turkic peoples of the steppe, the Kazakhs, the Uzbeks, the Turkmen, the Kyrgyz, the peoples who still live where the horse lords rode. They share the language. They should share the blood. They do not. When geneticists place Anatolian Turks on the great map of human populations, they do not land anywhere near Central Asia. They land in the Eastern Mediterranean, clustered tightly with Greeks, with Armenians, with the peoples of the Levant and Iran. Genetically, a Turk from Istanbul is far closer to a Greek from Athens than to a Kazakh from the steppe, even though he shares a language family with the Kazakh and fought wars for centuries against the Greek. The nearest kin of the Turkish people, written in the blood, are the very neighbors their empire spent 500 years at war with. The language points east toward Mongolia. The genome points home at the coastline outside the window. Now, this is the moment to be honest, because the truth is more interesting than the slogan. The steppe layer is real. It is not zero, and it is not nothing. Read a Turkish genome carefully and you can find it, a genuine strand of Central and East Eurasian ancestry absent in the Greeks and Armenians next door that could only have come with those horsemen out of the grass. In some regions of Turkey, it runs higher than in others. In the far east of the country, the steppe signal is stronger, and in some Anatolian communities you can see the incoming line more clearly than in others. The nomads did not just leave a language and ride off into legend. They left descendants. They married into the villages and the cities, and their blood is genuinely there, mixed through the population, a true and measurable inheritance from Central Asia. But it is the minority partner, not the majority. And that is the whole revelation. The honest genome does not erase the steppe R, it puts it in proportion. The Turk carries the horseman inside him, but the horseman is the smaller voice. The larger voice by far is the farmer of Anatolia, who was already old when the horseman arrived. So let us return to the question we began with. How does a people conquer a land, name it and rule it for 900 years, and end up made in the flesh of the people they conquered? Because conquest, it turns out, is not the same thing as replacement. You can take a country's throne, its language, its faith, and its name, and still not take the thing written in the blood, not when the people you have conquered are too many, too rooted, and too old to be washed away by a few 100,000 newcomers, however victorious. The Oghuz came as lords and won everything a lord can win. And then, generation by generation, they were absorbed, their blood diluted into the vast Anatolian Sea, their descendants indistinguishable in the genome from the farmers and the Greeks and the Armenians their ancestors had ruled. They gave Anatolia a new name and a new tongue. Anatolia gave them, in return, its own 10,000-year-old face. That is the code written in Turkish blood. Not the pure nomad of the nationalist dream riding out of Mongolia unchanged. Not the faceless Middle Easterner of the lazy map. Something harder and far more remarkable, a people who conquered a homeland so ancient that it quietly conquered them back, who set out to make Anatolia Turkish and were themselves in the blood made Anatolia. The horse lords are gone. The name they left endures. And beneath it, in the faces on the streets of Istanbul and Ankara and Izmir, the oldest farmers in the world are still tending their fields, still here, still home. Every conqueror who crossed into Anatolia was certain he had taken it. The blood remembers who took whom.